dig my grave if it's mine to choose. Feels like there's nothing left for me to lose. I'll dig my grave. How many times I've got to tell you I'm all caught up in bad advice? So many times I've had to hear you say, you know what you gotta do. I used to hang on to words that make my sting if you stung me first, but I pass upon a needing you to understand my views. It gets lonely, but I've learned by now there's more emptiness in the smiles you're forced to wear. I need my grave if it's mine to choose. Feels like there's nothing left for me to lose. I need my grave. There's that obsession again.
All right, there we are. Hey everyone, Greg Staley here of Diverge Media. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're excited to have our next guest on. She is the candidate for the People's Party of Canada for Oxford County, my home stomping ground. So this should be an exciting one for me because familiar territory. So everybody, thank you for joining us, and let's welcome Wendy Martin. Oh, there we go. There we
Hi,
go.
Greg.
How's
Did
it
you
going?
lose me there? It's going good. And you?
Good. So we're going to have a good debate tonight and go through some topics here that we believe are important to people to make up their mind in the election, starting with right out of the gate, opposing the vaccine mandate, the passport, or be removed. Jonah Smith's removal from the CPC. So I'm just going to read in a little bit of the article here, and then we'll have a little banter on it. So the former Yukon Conservative candidate said he has been rejected from the party over his stance on vaccines. Jonas J. Smith announced his candidacy on July 13th. He was acclaimed as the Yukon candidate. He ran in the 2019 election and was nearly successful, narrowly losing to the Liberal candidate Larry Bagnall by less than 1% of the vote. The decision to end his candidacy came from the party's central campaign. According to Smith, who said he was informed of the decision early on August 12th, his statement on the end of the candidacy went out later that afternoon. So this comes as shocking news to me and thousands of my supporters. With an election call imminent, this is devastating news. So basically ejected from the party over his views on the vaccine passport and the mandate. And so let's just touch on that. What are your thoughts on obviously the ejection from the party? And more specifically, we'll go into the vaccine mandates and the passport as well.
Okay. Well, actually, I'm quite shocked that he was ejected for his personal opinion on the vaccine mandate and passports. One, because the vaccine itself, we are still in under an emergency act for the vaccine. We don't know any, long history of what's going to happen in 5-10 years with the vaccine. So I think, going against the mandate and going against the passport is actually protecting our freedoms and our charter of rights as well. I mean, when is it, where do we limit this? It's a virus that on average, for the average person, has less than a 1% chance of death and 6% over 76. So if you're over 76, you're vulnerable. And you need to be protected. And, so when I take a look at the passports, you're creating a two-tier system of people. We've all had vaccine passports. I want everyone to realize that. Like, we've had our vaccine cards that when we go to school and we go to the doctors, and for those of us that got vaccinated, we have a record of that. If you were to ask me to find that record of vaccination, Greg, I'm 56 years old. The chances of me coming across that is probably going to be 0 to slim. Now, I do have twins that are 31, and as I was going through some stuff that was packed in a box from move to move, I actually found my daughter's vaccine record, not even complete. I opened it up, and there's like 2 shot dates on there, and that was about it. So
let's expand on that a little bit before we get lost here. Is that, I know, is a huge argument that keeps coming up, is like, well, we already have this thing, but I think you're touching on it. It's never been something that's been required to participate in society. There's exemptions. It's been clear that there's exemptions, but furthermore, you never carried it around with you to just function in society. So sorry, I cut in there and let you continue.
No, that's okay. No, and that's because our society believes in freedoms. We believe in protecting that private information that doesn't have to be divulged to an individual out there. I say, could you imagine if somebody, got tested for, some sort of STD or HIV, and, they had to announce to the world that, they're sick. That's not right. Some people catch different types of diseases innocently. And this is a virus. Okay. And it's a virus that mutates. Yes. Because that's what viruses do. When you have the flu, you get a vaccine for the flu, but it doesn't prevent you from getting the flu. Right. And we were never mandated for anything like that. Like, I mean, I want to take a look at, let's go down the rabbit hole for a second here, Greg. Okay. So if I'm unvaccinated, which I am, I have no problem telling people that. I'm waiting. I want to see my family. I have family members that are vaccinated. Great. I have no problem with that because I respect their choice, because they do informed consent, right? So they get to take that risk factor, and each and every person has the right to take that risk factor. Okay. So, but if I, let's say I got cancer, I don't want people to know. But if we're going to look at viruses and illnesses and stuff like that, let's look at a smoker. I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about smokers, because that's your choice. That's your risk, right? So, but my risk is secondhand smoke. So if I'm walking down the street and somebody's smoking, wouldn't that, harm my health? As according to what they're saying, that, the virus harms everybody's health. But Greg, can I ask you a question? This is what the media is telling me. Okay. So when I listen to the media, which I don't like to listen a lot to, and Dr. Tam. So when I look at a vaccine, okay, we'll give it what they call it, but we know it's gene therapy, but let's call it a vaccine just to be nice. So you can, if you're vaccinated, you can still get the virus. You're just going to get, maybe your risk factor is maybe you'll get a little bit less sick. Okay. Yep. You can still transmit the virus. Okay. Dr. Tam says you're still going to have to wear a mask. Now, the risk factor, they haven't come out to tell you all of the side effects. Pfizer's just came out and now put Bell palsy on the side effects. We know there's heart conditions and there's risks like that. So let's take a look at the unvaccinated. What can they do? They can transmit the disease the same as the vaccinated. They can get sick just the same as the vaccinated. Their risk factor, they may get a little bit more sick, but they have a 1% chance of survival unless you have health issues and stuff like that. So, your health.
99. Sorry.
Yeah.
Reverse numbers there. No, I hope it's more than a 1% chance.
Oh, sorry.
99.
Yeah. Thank you. 1% chance of death, right? If that, like point. Yeah. I mean, you're getting it anywhere from 0.3 to 0.7. So let's just take 1%, just to give them the extra buffer there if you want, but a 99% chance of survival. Right. So, but my question would be again to you, if you can answer it there for me, Greg, because I'm going to put you on the spot too as a as a moderator here. So, if there is a preventative way, okay, of preventing you getting COVID-19, we're listening to virologists come out that are telling you to stay healthy, which means get your vitamin D, get your vitamin C, get your vitamin A, get zinc. Okay. And, use things like turmeric, curcumin. And then there's ivermectin and HCQ, right? Like these were proven to work. So why are we not having some sort of pre-treatment, or, instead of saying eat healthy, go out on Wednesdays and visit your local fast food restaurant and buy fast food?
It's a good question. I'm not sure what the answer is. It's been one of my biggest criticisms. I literally went on. I'm gonna oust myself. I was the Greg who went on Jamie West's radio show, and I brought up those questions. I said I'm a 27-year-old man. I'm not really. I've seen the stats. Like I'm gonna be okay. Like it would be catastrophic the other way. It's so improbable that I'm gonna have serious consequences from this. And I asked those questions. Well, how long does it normally take to develop a vaccine? Oh, that's 10 to 12 years. Well, how long have we known? Even just the lipid nanoparticles, I think they've only been kicking around since about 2017, which is the delivery system of this. And so it's like 3 to 4 years. And yes, you're right. Why is vitamin D, according to our health minister, a conspiracy theory when we know that many Canadians are vitamin D deficient majority of the year, let alone the peak flu or peak virus season, which is the winter? I proposed the question on the Jamie West show. I said, well, if it's all about health, I got a question. Why aren't we proposing a BMI passport? Sorry, you're too big. You need to go home. You're at a higher risk of getting hospitalization from COVID. And I think I said 70% of hospitalizations have been in the obese. Now, like flash alert here, I am also in that group right now, and I'm currently working on losing weight. So for me to make this point was a double-edged sword, but I mean that. So if it's all about health, why hasn't there been these discussions? And I think that is something to have a conversation about, because I don't understand why it's been no promotion of healthy living, healthy eating, drinking more water, vitamin D, zinc. You can take. These are natural things you can take at home that cost just mere dollars to get yourself. And there hasn't been that. Instead, there's not only been a push on getting something. Like I could have understood, and I'll bounce this back to you, but I could understand a targeted approach where we have in the most at risk, and we'll just say above 50, that's probably the target range, because that seems to be where the cutoff is, where there's a steep decline in deaths and hospitalizations, at least from the data I've looked at. So if that's the case, why aren't we talking about that and having a targeted approach? Why has it always been everyone, and even the people that it doesn't make sense? We're talking about now in children, we're talking about in young men, like such as myself. And for full disclosure here, I was a reservist in the military. They told our unit to stand down because COVID. We said, this is the logic here. We need to be battle ready. Therefore, you can't go to boot camp because we're going to keep you out of this right now. We're going to delay all that stuff to keep you safe. And this was months in, and the data was already coming out, and we were looking at, hey, it's not affecting young people and children very much. So to bounce that back, why do you believe that there hasn't been a targeted approach? I think of the Great Barrington Declaration, where they basically talked about this. We threw out the pandemic policy playbook that said, listen, protect the most vulnerable. I also think of the military reports that came out, I believe in 2020, where they were talking about some of the, we'll just call it grotesque and heinous things that were happening in these long-term care homes. And it's not to put a slight on these workers who, listen, you got 3-4 people that are covering a floor of 30 to 36 patients, and those patients are all intensive needs that require a lot of time. That's going to burn anyone out, any good person. But this is the situation they've been put in. People were dying straight up of neglect. If you read those reports, there's one person who is fed laying down. They didn't bother to set him up, and they choked to death. That was one of the things the long-term care recorded. You can go down that list: bed bugs, feces on the beds, inadequate food, residents not getting all their square meals, on and on the list goes. So why hasn't there been more talk around the long-term care side of things? And that targeted approach is beyond me. Because again, if we're looking at, for me, the vaccine, it doesn't make sense to promote this in young people yet until there's more long-term efficacy out. But I think there's become a point here where it shifted, and now it's everyone must get it, and it's almost science is out the window. Let's just say, call a spade a spade. we know that this thing's aerosolized, yet they still promote masks. We know that children are low risk, yet they still got to promote mask and distancing in the kids. We know that teaching, for instance, is a pretty young profession, but they're still telling, all these things that just really don't add up. And we'll just take it from there. That was a lot, and I'm sure that's more than enough to go off of, so we'll leave it there.
Well, I think I can grasp most of it there. So let's start with the pandemic plan. Like you mentioned, they basically have thrown that book out the window. In the pandemic plan, it actually states in there not to test as much. Okay, it actually tells you to reduce the testing. It tells you not to promote on social media or whatever it is, because this was done, I think, in 1971. Was it not, the pandemic plan? But my memory might be off a few years. Yeah, something around there. I'm old, right? So I a little bit of age there happening. But when you take a look at that plan, you're right. They've taken that book that was actually written, and I actually think Dr. Tam was one of the writers. And one of the doctors that actually participated in writing that plan, but we haven't followed it at all. And the one thing, like my son got COVID and he was off work for 16 days. So what did they do for him? Right? So he wasn't hospitalized. He was just quarantined, but there was no therapeutics offered to him. No, nothing that was offered to him to help him fight whatever type of the virus he had. Right. And so I asked him, I said, so, how did you feel, during those 16 days off? Because he had to wait an extra couple days because the girlfriend was a couple days later and getting her positive test. And he says, I was really tired, Mom. I had a little bit of a fever for a day or two, and I had a runny nose. I said, so you had a cold. Right. So how do we know that the rapid test or the PCR test is actually detecting the virus or detecting a cold or SARS, right? Because they can't tell the difference in that test. They can't give you a test that says you've got this Delta variant. They don't have a test for it. They really do not have a test. And even the inventor of the PCR test says, hey, stop using it. Only, I think it's 22 or 25 cycles, and we were running up to 33 and 35 cycles. So we were having close to 50% false positive, which the news media told you. That's where I'm getting my stats from. I'm taking this from the mainstream media. So I don't have any qualifications as a doctor. The things that I'm repeating to you are the things that the media has reported to us. Now, I think the issue that we're having here with what's being reported isn't what's really being reported. It's what's not being reported is where we have the issues. So I'm going to jump to the 12-year-olds. Okay. And I'm going to think outside the box here. Okay, people. So is it really about the vaccine? Okay. So they're saying that a 12-year-old can give informed consent.
Never been the case in our history. Just to make clear, this is one of the most ludicrous things that's happened during this entire thing. But sorry, continue.
That's okay. So we're giving informed consent to a 12-year-old. We also did that with the trans agenda when a 12-year-old would like to transition to the opposite sex. They didn't have to get parental consent. All they had to do was tell their school counselor or go to a doctor, and they started them on hormones. So I would like to just take you back, and I want you to think outside of the box here. And what I'm going to say may surprise you. And so please be prepared, because it's not a nice thing that I'm going to say. We started with the transgender, okay, giving consent. I don't think a 12-year-old understands. According to Health Canada, our brain isn't developed until over the age of close to 25, right? So for us to be able to drive, we have to be 16. For us to be able to drink, we have to be 19. For us to sign any legal documents, we must be 18. So I'm missing this this mark of 12, okay? I want you to think of 12. Now we got 12-year-olds consenting to a vaccine with informed consent. What comes next, Greg? Can you think of where I'm going here? Okay, I'm going to tell you what Trudeau did with anal sex. He made it legal for 16-year-olds to say okay for anal sex. What happens when he gives a 12-year-old consent to have sex? And a pedophile can now violate a 12-year-old. That's where we have to think outside the box. Didn't want to bring it up, but we have to think about that. Why is our government so adamant about giving a 12-year-old consent, informed consent? Can we think about that for a second?
It's an interesting thought, and I'm not sure. That's a lot to digest for me right now, live on air, for sure.
It is. Yeah, I didn't give you a heads up on that one. Sorry.
No, this is completely blindsided for the audience here. One thing I can touch on is it's a huge decision. Whether or not you make that decision, I truthfully don't care. You do you. I'm whatever. I'm pretty libertarian in this approach.
Yep.
What I do think of is the John Hopkins hospital. I believe they stopped doing these surgeries altogether until they had reached 18, which is the traditional age of consent, simply because that many were happy with the surgeries, but later regretted the decisions because they found out it wasn't that. And the other flip side of that was many, after they went through puberty, became comfortable in their own bodies. I believe it was over 60%. The number escapes me at this time.
Yes.
So there is something to be said about being older and fully developed to make these critical decisions. They're not small decisions to make.
No.
And on the vaccine thing, we think about the government's approach, the media's approach, and how this tribalism has shaken out and how influenceable you are at that age. Yeah, it's concerning because, I mean, full-grown adults are struggling to make sense of this, that are reading through studies and things like that every day, myself included. And I think it's pretty easy to say that I've made an informed decision at 12 and then realize years later, even this happens all the time as adults, we make a decision and then we get more information and we realize the issue is at 12, you're very influenceable. You are susceptible not to just other people's ideas, but believing that those ideas that have been imprinted on you are actually your own. And so that I can understand that argument. I'm going to leave the rest to the side.
Yep. No, that's fine.
Again,
I just wanted to put it out there for the listeners to just kind of think about where this can go. Like things that happen in small steps, things that we might not ever notice. So if something obviously just like if this has been bothering me for a while, because I have a 6-year-old granddaughter and a 3-year-old granddaughter. And the thing of it is to have to sit down and explain to them their rights at 6 and to understand what's going on, because they question why they have to wear a mask. First, they thought it was kind of cool, and then they said, it's hot, I can't breathe, I can't play. And so, I'm listening to them. I'm listening to my friends that are vaccinated, and they decided that was their informed choice. And I said, I absolutely respect that. We have to stop this division. Okay. What happens, when you start to divide a country, which is what we're happening here. I want you to go back and look in history and take a look and see, when you start to divide a country, you're going to start a civil revolution. Do we really want a civil revolution? Why can't we just be civil to each other and respect each other's opinion and say, thank you for doing what you think is best for you. I'm doing this because I think this is best for me. And it's really none of your business. Seriously, but let's respect each other. And if we can respect each other, then we don't need to mandate anything. I mean, you take a look at Trudeau back in May of this year. He stated he would not mandate, vaccines. He said he would not push for passports, that he left that kind of ambiguous type of thing. And now he's threatening in his last little speech, last 2 little speeches that he had. One, he said that the unvaccinated would have consequences. Okay, I just wanted to kind of be dramatic there because it was quite hilarious. And then on the 18th, he comes out and he's talking about vaccinated and our freedom of choice. Right? He says our freedom of choice not to get the vaccine. He goes, but the unvaccinated will not be able to travel. They will not go on plane or train. They will not sit beside a vaccinated person and infect them. Honestly, I just wanted to smack my hand like this, okay? Because I'm going, whoa, hang on here. Where is it that the unvax is infecting the vaccinated? Because if you got the vaccination, shouldn't you be protected? Why are you afraid of the unvax? I'm going, and he sounded really fearful. And it was the first time I've actually seen him like like stressed right out when he was talking. And he's going, I'm looking after your freedoms and your democracy. You know, I'm fighting against tyrannical governments and being democratic. And I'm going, whoa, no. Vaccine mandates, passports, you know, limiting our travel, that's tyrannical government. And remember, in your constitution, you have the freedom to travel from province to province without a barrier. He just put a barrier in there. When are people going to realize it?
Well, that's exactly it. If you look at your passport, it literally says you have the right to travel freely in this country. So to expand on this a little bit more, I was saying earlier today, but it feels like the Liberals they haven't even put out a platform, and it feels like they're running literally on this vaccine mandate, on the passport, and playing to people. Really, the worst part of people is playing to their fear. And I just want to get your take on that. Do you see it as playing to fear, or do you believe that Trudeau genuinely feels that that's the best way forward? Or is this a calculated decision from him looking at what he thinks he can win on right now?
Oh, I think this is a calculated thing. He's playing the vaccine passport and the vaccine mandate and the vaxxed against the unvaxxed. He's playing that card and he's creating fear. Okay. Like we talk about, you know, we don't want any propaganda. We want, you know, we want to make sure that there's no misinformation out there. But when the misinformation is coming right from our PM, it's kind of embarrassing, you know, and he's encouraging people there. He's getting cheers. I'm going, really? Like you're cheering because you want to segregate somebody. So we're going into, again, segregation. Okay. Isn't that what we fought to get out of when, you know, take a look at Black Lives Matter, for example? We want to get rid of segregation. I don't think we're a racist country. I think we're the most beautiful, loving country in the world. I think Trudeau is creating us to be divided.
I was just going to pull the quote from here. This is Trudeau. I believe this is the one where he said at the grocery store there, I had it ready to go.
Canada can't afford the Conservative Party's approach that denies science and peddles disinformation to the public on health measures. And let's not even get started on vaccines. It's bad enough that Erin O'Toole doesn't think his candidates should all have had their COVID-19 shots, but scrapping our commitment to make sure everyone on a plane or train is vaccinated, that's not just irresponsible, that's dangerous.
So that's true. Sorry, that's Trudeau. But what I found ironic about that, just to touch on this, is Erin O'Toole again has kicked out Jonas Smith, Yukon candidate, for being against the vaccine mandate and the vaccine passports. And then we watch on a provincial level, Doug Ford's okay with the same mandates for federal, and I believe it's federal employees, maybe healthcare workers. There's a few in there, but there's conditions right now. So I find this almost ironic that this is the attack point of the Liberals. Meanwhile, the Conservatives, to me, are playing lip service to this while they're talking about it. And I'll get your take. What do you think will happen based on actions? I don't think the Conservatives are serious about not bringing in a mandate, quite frankly, because I've seen the way they've treated their own candidates. And also the removal, the name slips here. There's 2 MPPs in Ontario that were just removed from the party. One was pregnant. The other was MPP Rick Nichols, who made the decision to not get vaccinated, and they were removed from the party. So again, this is attached to the Conservative brand as well. So what's your take on that? Obviously, the Liberals are very pro on this, but the Conservatives too are playing, I think it's lip service. But what's your take?
Well, I really think it's a violation of our constitutional rights. One, when does it matter what somebody's medical history has, whether or not they can do a job, whether or not that's part of your employment? That's actually against human rights. And when you take a look, I'm an HR manager. Graduated, just a few years back from York University. And when you take a look at that, it goes against everything that an HR manager is allowed to do. It's discrimination at the highest level, and it's medical discrimination. You just can't have that. And if you think it's not going to come, and he says he's not going to mandate vaccines, but he's going to allow businesses to make that decision, he's passing the buck. Like, come on, like, give me a break. And then who pulled your strings, Mr. Ford? What kind of things did they force you into to make a change in a matter of a week or two that you were going to mandate all your MPPs to be vaccinated or they were going to be kicked out of caucus? Well, you know what? That's illegal. You know, I'm not a lawyer, but I can tell you from an HR point of view, we would be taken to court. And there's many places that are starting to do that. I just heard of a friend who works in a law office, and they're going to mandate vaccines. She says it's a good thing she works most of her time from home. She asked for help on that. And it's like, these are lawyers. They should know. But if they're not constitutional lawyers, you know, they're just going to try to do what they can do and try to appease, a portion of the society that is scared. I understand, like, people, I understand, that you're scared. And, I live with my mom. I moved my mom in with me 6 years ago. My mom's 80. Okay. I worry about my mom. Okay. I don't want to lose her. And this is what she said to me. I said, "Are you getting the vaccine, Mom?" She goes, "Heck no." I'll use that word. Heck no. She says, "If the good Lord wants to take me at 80, let him." She says, "When do I go out?" "I go out once a month for 45 minutes for groceries with you to get some fresh air. I sit outside on the deck all day long. I enjoy my life." She says, "If I was in a nursing home and I was more socially active, I might think about it." She says, "But," she goes, "really, the more I listen," and this is my mom who listens to CNN all the time, people, okay? Like most seniors do for some reason. And she still says it's BS. She goes, What are they talking about?" She says, "Well, that's crazy." I said, "Mom, just switch it off. Like, you don't need to sit there and watch it," because she was getting really scared and they were putting fear into our seniors. And our seniors, if you're in a vulnerable position and you think the best decision for you is to have a vaccine, that's fine. And it actually has been mandated in many homes. My mom's good friend lives in a senior living, like she doesn't need any medical help or anything like that, but she lives in a senior home. And they came in one day and they vaccinated her without her permission. She said no, she was not taking the vaccine. And they gave it to her anyways. And, this friend of my mom's has cancer. And she says, "I don't want the vaccine." And so she was quite upset that the nurses and that came in and they gave her the vaccine. And she was on the phone. She was very upset with my mom. And I said to my mom, if I was her, I said, I'd be taking them to court. They can't just come into your residence. There was nothing that she signed to say that it was mandated, but because she was over the age of 80, they forced her to take the vaccine, even though she's in a self-living retirement home. So this is really scary because where do our liberties end? Like, have we just lost them? Like, seriously, our freedoms are extremely important. Like, we take a look at WW2 and the Korean War. If we didn't win some of those wars, where would we be? Our soldiers that are in the ground right now, if they were alive, they would, what did we fight for? What did we fight for? My brother is a veteran. And you know what? What did he fight for those almost 30 years in the military? You know what? He fought for our rights and freedoms. I'm very lucky he never passed away. He never lost his life to anything. But I have friends that have committed suicide with our veterans because they don't have the help and the support from our government either. So where do we stop this division and start thinking of Canada and each Canadian person is being able to make their own decision instead of the government deciding what you're going to do?
I think one of the craziest things that I've ever been told, well, two. One, I was told I was woke. I was by Mr. West on the radio, and I've never been called that in my life, but that was pretty funny. But people need to understand that this isn't approved. This isn't approved the same way everything else is. And I'll just pull this up. This is from, well, you can pull up the interim emergency use. You can actually see it, but this is part of my article I did the other day on Aaron O'Toole's platform. But you can see these are all under interim approval. This is AstraZeneca, biotech, on and on the list goes. They were all approved under interim order based on the FDA's approval of them. And I've been told, this was the second thing, was we're in a war right now. People are drawing this parallel almost like they want it to be true, but we're drawing this parallel and then saying we can suspend rights well, then they're not rights. And we'll move on here, but I'm going to leave it at this and then let you comment. But are they rights or are they privileges? Because if they're rights, then they're all the time. And if they're privileges, the government gets to decide whenever they deem fit. And my biggest issue with all this is, they've been stripped away, and then our court system is punting down the road all these charter challenges. We're 18 months into this thing, and we still don't know if this is okay by the charter.
That's right. But these are rights. These are our rights, not just under our Charter of Rights. But you have to remember, we have dual rights here. We also have, common law, which predates our Constitution. And we also have civil law. So we are a dual society here when it comes to our law system. We have to make sure that what is made law is right under common law and is also respected under civil law. Now, the only province to have civil law that runs under civil law is Quebec. The remainder of Canada does run under common law. So that means the remainder of Canada does have rights under common law. And people forget about that. So this is not a privilege, people. If it's a privilege, we are now in a communist or socialist country. We are no longer in a democracy. And this is your last fight for democracy before it goes to the fact that our rights become privileges. And that means we're a two-tier system. You want to just kind of wear something on your arm to identify you as who you are. Do you want to have a QR code in your arm so that you can pass to get groceries? There's all these things that can come that we're not thinking about. If we don't fight right now, and I understand those that are fearful of the virus, I respect their fear, but at the same time, my rights don't end where yours begin. Okay, so if you believe that the mask works, then wear your mask. If you believe social distancing works, then social distance. If you believe that you just want to go and hug your neighbor and your neighbor's okay with it, hug your neighbor, people. Give a hug. Don't be afraid.
Moving into our next spot here. Boom. Free speech. Where does the People's Party of Canada stand? Well, I think that's probably a pretty good pivot, isn't it?
That is a pretty good pivot. We just went right into that. We covered most of that just a few minutes ago. So I'm going to read a little bit just off the platform, guys, and say, where do our rights begin? Okay, so our rights as Canadians are freely held as an expression of belief and being eroded at an alarming rate. Okay, so first we're going to take a look at Bill C-10. Okay, right now it's still on the floor of the Senate, but we don't know, if it's going to be picked back up. And that was regulating social media. Okay, so that's basically saying if your opinion doesn't count, if it goes against the government's agenda. So I want you to go back to 1933. And then even further, we can go back into, the politics of Aristotle and how democracy was eroded. Okay, so when your freedom of speech to go and criticize the government is taken away from you, you no longer have democracy. That is what Bill C-10 is doing for you. It's taking your right to criticize the government. This happened back in Austria, in Nazi Germany as well, because remember, Hitler did take over Austria with a 98% population. Okay, but in the end, he took away everything he promised to give them and became a national state. Okay, and became a very severe communist state. If you didn't do what he said, then you didn't get the food stamps, you died, or you were in prison. If you were a disabled person, you were taken away and experimented on, and and then told that you died. All of these things are documented. My stepdad was involved in that. He was only 2 or 3 years old, and I remember him telling me stories right up until the day, about a week or so before he passed away. He says, never forget your history. He goes, once you forget your history, you're deemed to repeat it. He goes, don't live through what I lived through. Sorry. Because he was just a child. If he was here today, he would just wish to be dead because he would see exactly what's happening. I would like you to talk to somebody of the Jewish faith that might still be alive or have stories from their grandparents, and find out what happened. It just wasn't the Jews that were persecuted. It was also the German people. So if you think your government loves you and is starting to take away your freedoms and your freedom of speech to give your opinion, they don't care about the people. They don't care about your families. They only care about their agenda. So we need to make sure that we're fighting this. And I'm kind of glad that, the Senate's put it on the floor for right now. But what's really important when you take a look at our platform and why we are so adamant about freedom of speech. Okay, so we just want to make sure that, you're not using hate speech as it is listed in the criminal code. We need to go back to that definition, and Bill C-36 wants to change that definition of hate speech. Okay, so we have to be very careful of that, understand what those bills are. So this is what happens in history. So history and social scientific research shows that freedom of conscience and freedom of expression, when maximally protected, advances the intellectual life of a nation, because we're allowed to have our own opinion, people. We don't have to agree with the other person's opinion, but we need to respect it, and they need to respect ours. This is what's happening in our freedom of speech, and we need to be able to fight for that, because just because I don't agree with you doesn't mean you don't have a valid point. And doesn't mean
I'd also add that it just because you don't need to agree, but it doesn't mean you can't be collegial. And at the same time, if you believe in the Socratic method, then you need to believe in freedom of speech, because that's the deduction of falsehoods by discussing and debating and questioning. And if you're unable to question, you're unable to think. You're losing the mechanism to think. And I've talked about that before personally, but I truly believe that if you can't speak and be wrong, like that's what, you have a dialogue, and that's how you find out sometimes. Those thoughts don't go away. Those ideas don't go away when we prevent freedom of speech. In fact, what happens is they go underground and they become more radicalized because they can't have debate and have that back and forth. And I kind of believe we're at that point in social media right now where people only see really their side, unless you're going out of your way to try to follow people that have different opinions on social media, which this is something I do. I try to balance it out on both sides. But if you're not doing that, you're only seeing things within your own echo chamber. And it's really just this, I believe, is part of the gaslighting of society. Nobody's talking to each other anymore, even though they think they are. And it's like we're operating on different sets of facts because people are only seeing one side of the story versus the other. And then they go, you're an idiot. Well, no, you're an idiot. Well, you're a name this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 names. And then the other side's got their list of names. And then if you don't see that it's the same but different on both sides, then that's part of the problem. But I believe strongly, we'll close out on that free speech. You need to be able to think, to be wrong, and to have that collegial dialogue, and to get better. I think you touched on that, which was what reminded me of it. So looking at the time here, moving on, we're going to go on another hot topic, PPC immigration, combating accusations. So, we'll just keep it going. Obviously, these are all the typically uncomfortable conversations. So People's Party of Canada, I put combating accusations in there for a reason. In the 2019 election, we're accused repetitively kind of being racist. I don't know what that was based on. Really, I think it was mostly honed in on the immigration policy. But I'm going to give you a chance to kind of expound on the People's Party of Canada's approach to immigration. And then we'll just kind of, I guess, why is that not racist? To state the obvious.
Right. Well, it's just not racist. As a free country, as we are in a democracy, we also have some obligations, humanitarian obligations for immigration and refugees. Okay. So refugees is basically somebody that can't return home. Okay. Because, they would be killed. And so what Canada does is Canada allows them to come in and they become Canadian citizens. A lot of refugees basically stay in a refugee camp until it's safe to go back to their country. So if those refugees wanted to go back to their country, it might be very difficult because they're now Canadian citizens, but they're always welcome here in Canada for humanitarian reasons. So if someone's being persecuted for their religion, for the skin of the color of their skin, for anything along that, their sexual orientation, and, they're welcome in Canada because we do humanitarian refugees. Now, when it comes to our immigration, we put a cap on it. And we should. Okay. We have an extremely high unemployment rate. We have a housing crisis issue. We have jobs that nobody seems to want to do. And we have jobs that are open and we don't have qualifications for anyone to do that. So our immigration is basically very straightforward. It's the way immigration used to be many years ago. Economic need. Okay, so if we need doctors and nurses, or we need scientists and we need teachers and we need things like that, we have to be able to bring those people over to Canada and let them immigrate. Okay, now what's really important is, but we don't want to be taking jobs away from Canadians. That's another thing. Like, I mean, if we have mass immigration and we're looking at, what was the numbers, 1 million over the next 5 years, or 1 million a year for the next 5 years?
I think it's 300 to 350,000 per year. Depends on, the government in power too. But yeah, we're looking at roughly 1.2 million over 4 years. So every election cycle, 1.1, a little over a million, we'll say.
A little over a million in 4 years. And that's a lot of people. Now, mind you, Canada is a massive country, but most of those immigrants land in Toronto. They land in Vancouver, and sometimes they're even now landing in Edmonton. So they're landing in big municipalities, which is causing houses to rise in price, right? So, people are paying double or triple the amount of rent that they should be having. So immigration takes a big chunk out of our economics and our monetary policies and stuff like that. Because not only, are we bringing them in, but I think what we need to do is when we bring in people that have qualifications, like they're doctors, and they don't meet our qualifications, they end up, I talked to some of them and they're taxi drivers, Uber drivers. And I'm going, well, we need doctors. Why are we not bringing in the people that have these degrees, putting them to school? I would rather see our tax dollars go to educating them so that they can meet our standards, right? So that we can then they come to Canada for a reason, people. Okay. Immigrants come to Canada because we are the land of milk and honey, I guess you can say. We have great prosperity. We have a beautiful, loving country. They're leaving areas that are discriminatory, that are famined, that do not have clean drinking water, that do not have the basic needs of life. And so they're coming to Canada to be able to be a productive person in society. Think of it yourself. If you were to move to a country that has this great opportunity for you, but you're stuck on welfare for the remainder of your life, which is maybe less of what you had than when you were in your other country. Okay. Tell me, are you going to be happy being in Canada? Or do you want to bring immigrants in to be happy and to be part of our culture? Bringing immigration in is really, really something that we have to take a look at, because we don't want to forcibly change our culture and our social fabric of our society. So they should be vetted very well before they come into Canada, because we have a great culture here in Canada. Okay. We used to be able to go to the European, go to Europe, put our Canadian flag on, welcomed into everybody's house. You're Canadian, come on in. You're biking across Europe. Fantastic. Stay the night. We'll give you some food. Now I'm pretty sure Canadians that if they still can travel and do that, they don't want to put the Canadian flag on because they're embarrassed by our country and what Trudeau has done to it. We're a laughing stock, across the UN. Really, seriously, I don't want to be in the UN, but they probably laugh at Canada. I mean, you spent all that money, to get on the security board, and we lost our seat, right? We didn't get it. We spent thousands of millions of dollars to do that, he bribes. So we have to make sure that our immigration policy is strong and it actually promotes good Canadian culture, and it brings happiness and wealth to those that are coming to Canada. If we have 1 million people coming in and there's no jobs, like COVID, 53% unemployment or 57% unemployment. Okay. Who got hit by that on this call? I did. It hit way too many people. So if we're still bringing in immigrants and we're still having people unemployed, we need to stop. We need to just bring in those that are being persecuted so that we can protect the humanitarian rights of others. That's kind of where I stand on immigration. I don't think we are all racist. We just want to make sure that Canada is prosperous and healthy and happy. And we are one, united as a country. You're a Canadian first. Greg. There's nothing before you as a Canadian, but you're a Canadian. If you're going to tell me, that you're something else before a Canadian, you're not. The only time you're not a Canadian and you want to stick to what's been given, okay, is our Indigenous rights, our Indigenous people. They will tell you that they're Indigenous. Some will say they're an Indigenous Canadian. You know what? You're Indigenous. You are a Canadian. You're always welcome. But some will tell you they don't identify as a Canadian because of the different treaties that we have. And because of, we also, we want to get rid of the Indian Act. It doesn't do any good for them.
Yeah, so there's a lot to deconstruct here. So I want to pull this up directly from the PPC platform here. So substantially lower total number of immigrants and refugees Canada accepts every year, from approximately 350,000 to between 100 and 150, depending on economic and other circumstances. And then reform the immigration point system related to accept a larger proportion of economic immigrants, accept fewer resettled refugees. So there would be a little bit of an argument in there from pundits that say that I guess the party wants to see that number down, but I think there's a few things to touch on here, and they're going to be uncomfortable because it's an uncomfortable conversation.
Yes.
But again, if we are bringing people in, I think you touched on this, and we're struggling currently with our economy, aren't we exasperating the problem? So I'll answer these questions with questions. So if we're already struggling with our economy now, and we're bringing in 350,000 more people a year, and we don't have jobs for everyone here right now, that could exasperate that problem. And another problem you touched on is the resettlement areas where immigrants are coming to settle. Toronto, Vancouver, and Edmonton are the hot spots. Now, we do have a massive country, so it is kind of an issue that we're settling in a few key areas, because the flip side of that, I think you touched on it again, is that if we already, again, I'll answer a question with a question. If we already have a housing crisis, and then we bring in 300,000 more people a year, and not just that, we're not settling them all across Canada geographically, we're settling them into a few key cities, then by definition, are you not exasperating the problem in that area more so? So these are the conversations that are being had. And I think it's a pretty easy one to make the racist accusation, just because it's one of those nuanced conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just leave you to kind of touch this. It is a nuanced conversation. So how do you have this conversation with your neighbor? How do you have this conversation with people when you bring up the PPC on immigration? Because obviously it was a really hot, contested topic, and still is, around the PPC. There's a lot of people still flying with these accusations. I think I understand where the PPC is coming from on this. So what is your take on that, and how to approach such a nuanced conversation that really requires kind of a basic understanding of the economic system and how things work, supply and demand a little bit? You need to understand a few things. Otherwise, it's easy to make that argument, I think. And I'm not saying it's a good argument or it's a correct argument. It's low-hanging fruit.
Absolutely, it's low-hanging fruit. But just because something is uncomfortable to talk about, and we talk about it, doesn't mean it's racist. We could sit here and just ignore the situation, or we could address where we're having an economical crisis and in Canada, and why we're having that crisis, right? Why is things going up? We're not saying that we're not against immigration. Okay, immigration is what builds this country. If we didn't have immigration, we wouldn't be here today. My family wouldn't be here. Okay, your family probably wouldn't be here, and yes, it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about, but you know what? Those are the conversations that need to be had. And you need to understand, if we're bringing in, just loosey-goosey, all these immigrants that are not going to help and be prosperous in Canada, that's not being racist to say that we're looking out for their best interests. We want to make sure that when people come to Canada as an immigrant, you're welcomed with open arms like you always are, but you're successful. Okay, we want to make sure that they've got jobs, right? So you have to look at it, from a different angle. When you take a look at, family reunification. Okay, if you would like to have family reunification, then you know what? The Canadian taxpayer shouldn't be paying for that. That should be you that's come to Canada. If you would, once you become a Canadian citizen and you want to bring your family over, then you do that on your dime, because that's you bringing in your family to take care of them as well. Take a look. I'm going to throw you something to Australia, which is going to be really interesting. You know, you can't immigrate to there after about the age of 40. You know why? Because they tell you you weigh too much on the healthcare system. So are they called, are they racist in Australia? Because they limit the age of someone coming to immigrate over to Australia. So take a look at that. Is that racist?
I think the word of the day, if we're going to do a Sesame Street thing, is cost benefit analysis. It's really not about, it's like system. Pull out the emotions. I think that's kind of how this is to look at it. And it's how I would hope my government looks at most things. I would hope they're not overly caught up in the emotion, but I know that's probably not the case because they look religiously at polling. But hopefully we're looking at the facts. And if you're looking at the facts, yes, there's uncomfortable conversations that come around, and then the public relations on it. How do you talk about uncomfortable things? But yeah, there's another thing that flip side of that I was reminded of as we were talking about it, is when we decide arbitrarily we're going to pull people in, rather not based on economic immigration, based on the skill sets they have, what happens, and I only know this because I worked on a farm with a couple for almost a year that was from the Ukraine, and they were there on a work visa, and they were trying to get their citizenship. And at the time, Trudeau had decided that we were going to take more immigrants in from Syria. And that's not, we're not making any assessment on that. But as a side, what happened was that they were deciding, okay, we're going to increase the numbers over here. So we're going to take in less numbers from other countries. And as a result, my friends were on the knockoff list. They were unable to get their citizenship now because of the decrease. So I think that is also one of the side effects when we arbitrarily choose where to go from. And the cost benefit analysis is talking about, should we only focus on economic immigration? I guess here's the question, is how do you strike the balance between economic immigration and then doing the humanitarian thing and pulling in a certain number of refugees who are not necessarily going to be what the country needs in terms of the economy, in terms of jobs, in terms of the professions that they're qualified to work in?
Well, I think when you're taking a look at non-economic, immigrants or refugees, okay, we have to take a look at basically where the refugee is coming from, okay, why they're coming to Canada. I mean, take a look at Roxham Road. They're coming from the US. They're flying in and walking over. They're not refugees. They're not fleeing their country because they're, being persecuted. They're just walking over the border. And so that's a big issue, okay? So refugees usually come from refugee camps because they usually flee to a neighboring country, and then they can usually, ask for refugee status in different countries around the world. Okay. Now, if you take a look at, you want to take a look at different countries, the Ukraine, if you don't follow the proper process as a refugee, you get walked right back out through the gates because they've had enough. And this is where Canada has to get a little bit tough. And some people aren't going to like it, but we do have to follow some rules here. Why are you coming through a spot in our gate, basically in a fence illegally? Illegal refugees should not be accepted into Canada unless they follow the proper process. They should have to go through the border and they should have to claim refugee status. So that's all that we're saying. It's like, because we do have a gap in our system, and that's going to overrun because we're not even vetting these refugees. Okay. So I think that's also a security issue for Canada as well, if you want to go down that route. So we have to be a little bit more stringent on what we're doing as well, to make sure that the people that we're bringing into Canada are true refugees. They are, they don't have anything that's a black mark on their, in their history. They're not terrorists. They're not from any radical group. And I'm not saying that they are, but Greg, at the same time, like, don't we have to protect Canadians too? But we also have to have our humanitarian arm out to be able to help those that need it.
Let's touch on that from the policy here. This is one of the things that's, again, on the policy, and is ensure that every candidate for immigration undergoes a face-to-face interview. answers a series of specific questions to assess the extent to which they align with Canadian values, and then increasing the resources for CSIS, RCMP, Canadian immigration, citizenship to do these interviews and thorough background checks. So that was one of the points that the People's Party of Canada has made a point of contention, is to make sure that there is ample resources to do proper vetting and background checks, because that the argument was that this hasn't been happening enough under the current government, under the current Trudeau Liberal government.
That's right. I mean, our Trudeau government doesn't do a background check. They don't do one-on-one interviews. This used to be standard in Canada, and that's what I want people to understand. This is nothing new, okay, that Max has put forth on the platform and something that we speak about. This is something that was done years ago, and why we had such a great system for bringing immigrants to Canada, bringing refugees, and why we were such a great country that people wanted to come to, because we actually followed protocol when it comes to proper vetting and immigration and bringing those people safely here, and that they could have a great life. And I think we've got away from that. We've just gotten, oh, anyone can come to Canada. Well, that's open borders. That's a UN agenda. No, we're not open borders, people. You can't just come and go. Well, heck, now you can't anyways. We're closed borders, for heaven's sakes. Look what we've done to the U.S. We can't open those borders. Now you can't come if you're vaccinated. But
they can come here, but we can't go there, right? Isn't that
well, I can fly
right
there.
Now?
I can fly there, actually. And that's not a problem. But I'm unvaccinated, so I probably can't get on a plane in October, to fly. So I don't know. It's but it's okay. Like, that's not, it's not going to bother me. But I will not get a passport so that I will not get a vaccine and support a passport just so I can travel. I have a beautiful country here in Canada that I can see from coast to coast, and we best enjoy the East Coast because they got the best lobster and scallops around. And, you go to the West Coast and you got some great wine out there in BC, and you can stop and look at our history of, what a great country we are. And we need to unite Canada from coast to coast. What's happening in Alberta now with, the separation and everything that's talked, this should never be an issue here in Canada. There's a division happening. We need to stop it. And I think the PPC is the party to stop that division and to bring everybody together again. So we just need to have an open conversation, and a common sense government is basically what we need, and this is, here's a comment here for you. Okay, Greg. So the government is voted in by the people, for the people. Why is our government now going against the people? They're not listening to the people.
Well,
I want that voice to listen, right? They don't have to listen.
Well, and this is a huge point of contention. I don't think people are upset about, but they should be, is this has been going on 17, 18 months, and we don't have a cost benefit analysis yet from a government come out. Nobody's taken the big picture into context. In addition, it hasn't been through the court process yet, whether or not this is okay according to our current laws on the books. And then you want to say we have a democracy, but none of these laws that are being passed or mandates different things are even going through the legislature. They're just happening. And so, yeah, I wanted to touch on one more thing before I circle back here. But PPC, you said the PPC is the party to unite this. So I have to ask the obvious question. How is the PPC the party to unite Canada when it seems there's so many, we'll just say, so much rumor and vile accusations around the party themselves? I'm not saying they're true, but how do you get over the perception that's out there and get people to hear the message rather than to see the tribe? Does that make sense? Rather than just see what they think is perceived as bad, the tribe. Mm-hmm. How do you get them to actually look at the message and see that you're coming from a place of caring?
Well, one, if you take a look at a lot of the candidates in the PPC, we're definitely not, former, MPs. A lot of us have not been in politics before. Some of us have been in different, different levels of, of politics over their life, and some of the candidates. But when we're talking to you, just listen to what we're saying and make sense of it. So why are you always questioning everything that seems to come out because somebody else is telling you that it's wrong? When is our Canadian, people, when are they going to come back to think for themselves? Okay, the media did a big smear job on us with Kinsella in 2019. And it was hard. It was hard as a candidate to take those remarks that were coming about us, but we talked about them. We faced those. I lost friends, okay, running for the PPC because they said I was a Nazi, I was a racist, and I looked at them and I'm going, I'm telling you the truth. I said, so I'm showing you information. And nobody seems to want to take information and look for it. They want to just be told what to think. So I'm not going to tell you what to think. I'm going to ask you to use your brain. I'm going to ask you to investigate this. I'm going to ask you to look back in history and even back further into history. Don't go into the 1930s. Well, what happened, 2000 years ago, and where you had groups that were getting, trying to get rid of democracy, and they were, doing all this thing. I said, so, it kind of runs itself in a cycle. And I said, with politics, and I said, so when you go against the narrative, you're going to be targeted. Okay. And I still got targeted even after the election because I promoted PPC, and I still promoted PPC until I was reelected as the nomination for the candidate. So I didn't stop. I didn't stop pushing the buttons. I talked to people. And sometimes to get to where you need to be, you have to talk to a lot of people. A lot of people are not going to believe you. And then something's going to happen. It's going to change their mind. They're going to say, oh, you know what? Max was right on that. Max's policies, I would like to remind everybody that they would like to call us racist. Those were the same policies he had 12 years ago, and the policies that he ran on for the Conservative Party when he lost his leadership vote by 1% or 1.5%, whatever it was. Okay, so those policies have been the same for over 12 years. If they weren't racist back then, how are they racist today?
I think it's one of these things that like people don't talk about, right? Because we don't have collegial conversations anymore with people we may disagree with. But these aren't. Oh, I mean, it's just like we can't even have more than a surface level discussion these days. And I want to get your comments on this, and then we'll shift to our last couple of questions here. But it seems that people aren't willing to have these conversations anymore, and I feel as though social media has exacerbated that problem. So how do you get beyond the social media, we'll say, craziness, and just reach the people on a personal level? Because I feel like social media is the perfect example of it. It's like tribalism on steroids. It's everybody, preaching to their echo chambers and looking for likes and dopamine hits, instead of maybe digging beneath that and assuming that the person they're talking to who's saying something they disagree with is not coming from a bad place. I think there's a lot of assumptions that get made. So how do you get beyond that?
That's really difficult because I'm not a social media guru, right? I've actually changed my tone on social media. I used to try to comment, to each and every single person that made a comment on a post. Then there comes a point where you have to start to weed out. I don't want to call them trolls, but they want to instigate you. They want to take your words and use them against you. So the best thing to do is to, put things in print, post in print, something that you find is really important. Have an open mic type of thing. Invite people to Zoom. Because they're still limiting you on the amount of people to have at different events. So use the social media platforms that we possibly can to get people to come and talk to you. Go to the community events, talk to people, walk the streets, knock the doors, ask the questions. Don't be afraid to talk to people. Ask them what their concerns are. Okay, because we always forget, like we try to promote our party's platform. This is our platform. This is what you want, but let me see where my platform can help you on your issues. You know what? I need to know what your issues are. And if I know what those issues are, I can sit down and have a nice conversation with you. And I can say, so if we go in this direction, this is our platform. So this is where you're going to fit into the platform where that concern that you have is going to be addressed. Now, if we don't have that on our platform, then maybe it's something we need to look at. If we don't talk, and all we do is, just listen to everything, and we're not having our own thoughts, we're never going to get out of this social media roller coaster or, hamster wheel. So sometimes we have to choose other avenues, and it is going back to the door knocking. It is going back to seeing everybody face to face and asking people to send you their questions. Ask me a question. Don't be afraid to, don't just call me a name. Tell me why you don't like what I'm representing. And then we can start a conversation. Don't just call me a name because you don't like my leader. Because you know what? You're voting for me in my Oxford County. I'm your voice, okay? And I love my leader. I think Max stands for so much for everybody, and we could do so much for Canada. And so people just need to, just take a step back and ask me your questions. If you don't like Max, tell me why. Give me something legitimate.
I think that's a perfect pivot point into the next question here. What resonates most with the Oxford County residents in the People's Party?
In the People's
Canada
Party
platform.
Okay, well, we've got a great platform. We touch on a lot of different issues. So I think in my community, we've probably got 2 or 3 basic concerns that I'd like to touch base on. So I've already touched base on the vaccine, okay, because our community is, we have a lot of people that are unvaccinated within our community, and they want to be able to have those rights protected. So that's going to be resonating, with my voters this year. Some voters are pro-vaccine, and they want everyone vaccinated and separated. So I'm not going to get their votes. It's okay. I understand. It's just one policy. But if I'm fighting for your rights and freedoms, then I'm fighting for your rights to make sure that they're protected as well as you that don't want to vote for me because I'm for the unvaccinated and the vaccinated. I'm for both of you. I'm fighting for both of you because if your rights get taken away now, you're never going to get them back. And then I'll touch base quickly on our housing issue in Oxford. We have a lot of homelessness here. Okay. And the housing issue, most people in our community cannot buy a house here in Oxford. I live in Norwich, and the house across the street went up for $1.198 million in our little rural community. He just dropped it to $998, but $1 million home in a small rural community. Okay. The average new home that's built is over $1 million. Okay. So what's happening? Okay. What's happening in our housing market? We've got Jagmeet Singh who wants to give 1 million new homes or 10 million, whatever it is. Sorry, can't remember because it's not really going to help anything to help get homeless people off the streets. So we have a housing issue. Why do we have a housing issue? Because we've got people coming in and we have inflation that's going up. Okay. So that's just crazy. So when you buy a home or you sell your home, you got to pay the same price. You're not building any equity, right, in your home. But what's happening in all communities, not just in Oxford, is we have a lot of people buying single family homes and then putting the rent up to $4,000 a month. And they're doing it as a rental property. So we're actually creating our own homelessness by allowing people to inflate the house prices and allow developers to buy those homes and then turn them into rental properties, and no one's ever going to be able to afford them. Right. And then we've got our drug addicts and our homeless on the streets, and everyone thinks putting them in the home, a new home, or doing this and doing that is going to help them. Well, you know what? The base of the problem is let's find out why they're homeless. Let's find out why they're doing drugs. Let's fix the problem first, fix the person, get them healthy, then get them into like some sort of housing that will integrate them back into society to get them working and to get them on their feet. You just can't throw them in a home or an apartment building or anything like that and think they're just going to get better. If we don't help them, they're never going to get better. And they're just going to have more crime. The crime is increased, especially in Woodstock. And so we have to look at it. It's just not throwing money at something. It's actually taking that personal responsibility and actually doing something to help those people. Okay. And then our final big elephant in the room. Okay. I'm going to talk about supply management, and because we are the dairy capital of Ontario. So this is what I'd like to say to my supply management farmers. I respect you. What you do is amazing for Canada and for Ontario. You work hard and you deserve to have a good job that you're proud of. Unfortunately, supply management limits your amount of money you can make. You're under a socialist program and you don't even know it. We talk about supply management of when it came in was because that we wanted to make sure that we had enough, milk, eggs, chickens, and things like that for our people. And so, because sometimes we would have not enough, and sometimes we'd have a much. So when supply management come in, we also forget about how many farmers lost their jobs because they didn't get the quota. Okay. And so it's great. In the last election, I was up on a debate with Dave McKenzie, and I mentioned the amount of subsidies that are happening with our supply management. So Dave McKenzie then, after I spoke, came up and said, so my farmers, who's got that check for the subsidy? Not one person put their hand up. So Dave, I'm asking you a question right now. Where's their checks? What did you do for those supply management farmers? You didn't get them anything, did you? No, but you did ask them if they got their check. So you should have gotten their check for them. So now I want to go back to what happened in COVID. Okay, we dumped so much milk. So I'd like to ask the farmers, how do you feel about dumping milk that could have saved a family's life? So I talked to people about it. Why? Why are we dumping milk? And they said, because the schools are closed and we don't have enough packaging. Well, what did you do with all the packaging of the little milk cartons for the schools? Why couldn't you put your milk in those cartons, sold them as a case of 24 at the grocery stores? You were limited to the amount of milk and eggs that you could buy. When we have supply management, there should never be a limit to the amount of milk and eggs that you can buy. There was a shortage created, and it was created by the government. And we have to stop that. So I asked my supply management farmers, talk to me. There's a plan to make you more successful than what you've ever been. Don't look at what happened in New Zealand, because New Zealand didn't have a plan. We have a 5-year plan to make sure that you're successful. The amount of American milk that's coming in now from NAFTA, are you getting your subsidies check because you lost quota? I'm asking. I don't know. So I'm putting it on the table. I want to hear from my farmers. I want to talk to you. I want to show you a better way. I want to show you to be successful and more prosperous than what you are right now.
And the question here, where does the PPC stand on lockdowns? I think that's one we should touch on as well.
Oh, well, there's lockdowns. No.
Yeah. So this is obviously we have Aaron O'Toole in his plan talking about boosters. Let me just find this here. There we go. I'll pull it up so people know I'm not pulling their chain. I always try to do it right from the source. Canadians will need boosters. This is the Conservative plan, secure the future. Canadians will likely need booster shots to protect against COVID-19. We need to be ready for this. Canada's Conservatives will ensure that Canada has a faster, more consistent access to vaccines and future vaccines. So their kind of plan is increased testing is what it sounds like. And again, we touched on this at the beginning, but increased testing and then uptake. We're hoping they can drive more uptake in vaccines. As we touched on at the beginning, they also kick somebody out of the party for opposing those things. So where's the PPC's position, and then to contrast that against what's already available with the other parties and what they're offering.
Okay, well, first we'll go with the no more lockdowns. PPC is against lockdowns. Now you have to understand, if Costco can go by a percentage of people to go into a store, Walmart can do the same thing. Every single grocery store could do that. Why couldn't our small businesses do that? So if it was allocated that they could only have 3 people in their store, then that's what they have, is 3 people in their store. I want to take you back to, again, to basically big business made billions of dollars during COVID-19 and still are. We have restrictions. Why do we have restrictions just on small businesses and very little restrictions on big business? I'm going to ask you that question, because if the government controls the big business, they have control over you. If they can get rid of the small business, the small mom and pops, and those that are fighting for their community to keep their stores open, keep their restaurants open, and keep their business going, okay, they're doing that because they are independently owned and operated, okay? So they're supplying you with an option to the big box stores, Okay, so the government can control those big box stores because of the revenue that they bring in or the tax benefits boutiques that they give them. So they'll do what they say. So if your store could just stay open with, 5 people allowed in at a time, that's still keeping your business afloat, and that's still putting money back into the economy, into a small business person's pocket, making their life and their family successful, instead of putting it into, Amazon, Costco, Walmart. Okay, those are big corporate businesses that hardly pay any taxes to begin with. And I said, so why don't we give our support to our small individuals? So we're against lockdowns. You have to be fair. And lockdowns don't work. I mean, if they worked, we would have flattened the curve in 2 weeks, as they said, and we would have been out of this. Okay, so we know they don't work. So why are we doing it? You're just harming each individual person. Okay.
I think that's an interesting thing was you're talking about the small businesses weren't forced to be, or were forced to close, whereas big businesses weren't. And I just wanted to touch on, there was never any point where they said it's based on square footage. You can have X amount of people. I think they played with that for a little bit while small business was still open. And then at some point they just decided, nah, shut them down. Walmart, Costco are safe though. And then you can go there with 200 to 500 people. You're safe in Costco and Walmart. But if you go to that mom and pop shop with 2 other people in there, that's going to get you.
That's going to get you. Now, I can't remember the last one that you said. Sorry, I got going on lockdowns and missed the last part of that question. I can't remember. It's a memory thing, right? I'm old.
Well, I'm looking at time. It might be best that we just close out on that anyways. So normally, just for the record here, we try to keep it to an hour. But, it's a good conversation, so we're going to keep it going. But that was what resonates most with Oxford County residents in the PPC platform. We're talking about lockdowns, and we're talking about the square footage. But why, I think I said, why did not, it was one way for small businesses and not so much for the big businesses. So where the PPC stands on that, would have kept businesses, I'm presuming, open from the get-go.
Yes.
And maybe restrictions would have been in place while we learned about this. I think it's safe to say now we have enough information to make.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, we need to, understand this is something new. And, everyone was all for whatever came out in March. I'm pretty sure it's like, okay, well, let's listen. They're saying we don't need masks. They're saying this, they're saying that. So it's like, okay. And then months later, it's something different. And then it's something different again. They can't seem to keep their story straight. I said, we're 18 months in, 17, 18 months in. We should know now. We should know exactly what works and what doesn't work. We know masks don't work. But if you feel safe wearing one, please wear your mask. Okay. Like, don't put yourself under any stress. Now, you were actually, the last one was about the boosters and the vaccines and stuff like that. You know what?
Sorry.
We are, as a PPC, your choice. If you want to get the vaccine, it's there for you. If you don't, we're okay with that. We have to make sure that if there are boosters, are they safe and why? Why are we boostering? Like, let's make sure that we're putting everything together. I like to read something that I commented earlier. Okay. There was something that I seen with Dr. Robert Malone. Now, if you don't know who Dr. Robert Malone is, he's the inventor of the mRNA. Okay. And this is what he states about bioethics. If you don't know what bioethics is, please Google it and find out what it is. It has to do with vaccines and everything. And he says the COVID-19 injection campaign violates bioethics law. So I'm going to challenge the viewers that are here today. Go and look it up. Okay. So if you are somebody who is angry that people aren't vaccinated, I want you to look at this bioethics law. I'm not going to educate you. That's not my job. I'm going to give you some work to do, because if I just tell you, you're not going to listen anyways. So you might as well just read it from the inventor of mRNA. And if you realize he's not being silenced too much, he's being very careful on what he says, and listen to him. He's a smart man. He's a very, very smart man, and he's looking out for your future and your protection. And we need to be able to hear more from these, from these scientists that aren't being shut down, that are trying to get it out, and from the scientists and the nurses and doctors that are losing their jobs. Okay, because they're speaking out against something. They took an oath: do no harm. Remember that. Do no harm.
I think we're going to move into the last question here. Are you okay with taking a few questions? I've seen some pretty good questions in here that were related to the PPC platform. So I think it might be good circle back. But what, closing out here, and then we'll hit a few questions in the comment section. If you have them, start launching them in, and we'll see. I'll circle back and see what's there. But what's the most important election, not necessarily to the People's Party of Canada, but specifically you, Wendy Martin, candidate for Oxford? What's the most important? See how that all round. What's the most important part to you as the candidate for Oxford County? What is the most important election issue to you personally?
Well, I think to me personally, it has to do with your rights and freedoms. We have some great things that are on our platform, but right now it seems like every party's focusing on the vaccine, the passports, and those are, we have to protect you as a Canadian citizen. So if we can protect our Charter of Rights and our Constitution and the rights that we had before our Constitution came into be in common law, I think we have to fight for that. There's many issues, that I didn't even touch on in this interview, like veterans and Indigenous and different types of things for the economy and everything else. There's so many more. But I think right now at this time in the election, and I'm looking at, the other leaders as they're talking, I think our rights are definitely being taken away. And if we don't fight for those, nothing else really matters.
I think that's a pretty good closing. So I'm going to take this banner and then we're going to hit a few questions in the comments section here. Again, if you have questions for Wendy, please put them in now. I think this one from Hyper Hippie is pretty good. Will the PPC take us out of the Paris Accord? How about carbon tax and oil pipelines? What about China and immigration, legal or not? So I think clarify there that if you want to clarify, are you saying, do you believe China should immigration from China should be legal or illegal, or are you asking the question? But anyways, we'll go on the first two. Where's the PPC on the Paris Accord, and where are we on the carbon tax? So Paris Accord,
both out on the carbon tax, out on the Paris Accord, and we will implement the pipeline, and we will use the charter.
So that's one of the fundamental differences there. So Conservative Party, they will still have a carbon tax. I believe they say they'll cap it at 50, which is what it is now. So if you like the gas increases you've seen the last few years, expect it to stay about here and stagnate under the carbon tax of the Conservatives. But you're saying very important, because I laughed. I was looking through the Conservative Secure the Future plan, and they say we'll get the Keystone Pipeline built. Source, trust me. and was like, okay, there's going to be a lot of opposition. There's going to be a lot of environmental groups. There's going to be a lot of provinces that have issue. And so you hit that. The fundamental difference there in platforms is that the People's Party of Canada is saying that they'll use the charter. I'm not sure of the specific section. Maybe you are. But there's a section in there where it says for federal projects, you can basically override the provinces when it's for the greater good of Canada. Argument here is that the pipeline, obviously, huge revenue booster, stability to the oil and gas markets, on and on. We could list the benefits of this, but there is definitely an argument that it is for the greater federal good. And so you would implement that charter section so as to override basically any of the different provinces that may have issues, but basically because it is a fundamental infrastructure project is the view of the People's Party of Canada, if I'm understanding correctly.
That's right. Yeah, we will institute invoking section 9210 of the Constitution. Okay, that's where you can find it, and we'll invoke that, and basically that overrides every single province, so that we can get the pipeline. Now, I want people to understand Canada has the cleanest oil in the world, and right now we're taking in Saudi Arabia oil, right, that comes in to the East Coast. And it's very dirty, okay? And it's a very disgusting process that they use. They use a product to clean the oil called caustic soda, which has to be shipped from, into Texas, from Saudi Arabia. If that ever gets leaked into the ocean, it's going to kill the ocean. And it'll be a dead sea because it is very toxic. So people just don't understand that. I just happen to work for a company that cleans some of the caustic soda at one point in time in Saudi Arabia. One of their machines are there cleaning it. And it's a very dangerous thing. And people don't realize the difference of what oil is what and how clean our environment is in the oil sands that come from Alberta. And the fact that they've planted more trees The oil sands have planted more trees than Justin Trudeau was planted. Didn't he promise 10 million trees to be planted? He hasn't planted one.
I mean, he's promised a lot of things, so I stopped keeping track, if I'm being honest. So what was the term? Caustic oil? Is that what you said?
Caustic soda.
Caustic soda. How do you spell that? Because I've never heard that
Caustic,
term before.
C-A-S-T-I-C, soda. Caustic soda. I'm not, or C-A-U-S-T-I-C. Caustic.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah, caustic soda is what is used to clean their oil in there, and we have to take the caustic soda out of their waste because it's very dangerous. So they actually ship it to, I think it's Mary something in Texas. Starts with Mary. Oh my gosh, my brains haven't been there for 18 months, so I can't remember everything. But yeah, so it's a very dangerous substance. And if they talk about, you want to talk about having, carbon issues and green environment, that definitely is not something that you want traveling across your ocean. But it is what it is. But at least a little bit of information there for some people to take a look at and find out what it is. It's pretty nasty. So our oil is clean and safe. And pipelines are safer than, putting them on trains and transporting on the highways and things like that. And there's safety valves and stuff like that on these new pipelines so that if there is a leak, they can get to it right away before it causes any damage. And there really hasn't been an oil leak in a long time. And some of the old pipelines do need to be fixed and replaced so that they're up to today's standards. But we just have to think we can't cut off our right arm in oil and just go with green energy. Can't we just melt something together as a holistic plan? Look at that. Was that in the Quebec? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
The train, and it destroyed a town.
47 people were left dead after the disaster. And this has kind of been one of the arguments that falls on deaf ears a lot of times for environmentalists is, yes, pipelines are not only is it a safer way to go, but it is much better environmentally altogether. Because you talked about the tanker traffic, there's been leaks. It's not like that hasn't happened where tankers are leaking into the ocean, and then that's a huge wildlife cleanup. So why not have that pipeline? You touched on it. Some of the cleanest, most ethical oil, I think the cleanest and most ethical is here.
Yes.
I think we have those highest standards. I had the president for Canadians for Affordable Energy, Dan McTague, on talking about the Line 5 and some of the importance of these things that I don't think Canadians understand how important oil is. But talking about, I want to touch this because it's one of the things I've thought about. If we probably are facing increased taxes or service cuts or both on the end of this election after all the goodies are promised because of the debt. But one of the ways that can be avoided is by increasing revenue. And one of the things that doesn't get talked about, but obviously a pipeline is a huge revenue generator. So to connect that all in, it's like, it seems like a win-win-win. Not only would it make our markets more stable, it seems to be better environmentally. We think of the Meganek, I'm going to butcher the name, the rail disaster in Quebec. We think about some of the tanker spills that have happened. So why don't you think, I don't want to say Canadians, but why do you think there's such a pushback, at least in the media, to this concept of getting a pipeline built?
I honestly don't know. I don't know why they're against it. I like to take a look at, everyone's here on a beautiful computer, right? We all have our mouse. We all have our phone. You can't see my mic, but you have my mic. I can see yours. We all have clothes on, right? Without oil.
I hope so.
Without oil, people, we don't have this. Okay. And people have to realize that, your toothbrush, petroleum jelly, everything that is based with oil and gas. Okay. Can we reduce our use of oil and gas? Absolutely. Absolutely. There's ways that we can be more environmentally friendly, but we're almost carbon neutral, or we are carbon neutral here in Canada. But why aren't we attacking India, China for their carbon footprint? Okay. It just doesn't seem to be. Why are we attacking Canada? Canada is the sweetest country around. We give so much away. I mean, for heaven's sakes, our government just can send billions of dollars everywhere. but for our own people, we can't help our own people. So with the pipeline, we need it. Now, I know you touched with Cole a little bit on, the lithium ion battery. And, basically, I mean, you've got little kids in Africa mining for these rare minerals that are toxic. Okay. Mm-hmm. I know a fair bit about a lithium ion battery. My fiance runs electric boats with lithium ion batteries. I know how toxic those are. Okay. You cannot recycle them. You also can't make the car without oil and gas, because how are you going to, you have to use oil to lubricate. You need to have the belts and everything else going, right? I mean, I'm not a mechanic, but I know that if I don't put oil in my car, I'm going to seize my engine. I know that if a belt breaks, I'm probably not going to be able to drive anywhere. I know if I blow a tire, unless I'm going to wood tires, I'm not going to be able to, to do anything. And if I don't have a tire, because I don't have the petroleum and the oil and gas to be able to make the rubber to be able to make that, then I can't do anything. And I need that valve, right? So I can put the air in my tire. I need the pump, okay, to put the air in. Okay, without oil and gas, we don't have any of that.
Touch on there is lithium. It was actually part of the Secure the Future plan where O'Toole's talking about lithium mining. I'll find it here. Control F, everyone. It's your favorite friend.
Sorry, we're taking so long, guys.
I know. Conservatives say this will include adopting policies to facilitate the responsible exploitation and mining of lithium. So they do want to increase mining of lithium here in Canada. That's one of the Conservative proposals. There could be an argument that it would be good to do some of that here, but obviously the regulations is a concern. But it's also, there's in short supply. My understanding is that we don't even have, they're already in short supply of the things required to make these batteries. And then they want to go completely electric by 2030. In 2050, they're pushing all electric cars, and we don't already have the chips and the parts and the various things that we would need. And then touching on, and we'll close out here, and I think this is a good place to end. You touched on the pollution out of China. Get out of here. China's emissions now exceed all the developed worlds combined. Get out of here, Bloomberg.
Get out of here. There we go.
China spewed 27% of global greenhouse gases in 2019, more than all developed world's emissions combined. So they're on fire in all the wrong ways, and they're kind of not going the more environmental route. So this is the conversation when we talk about environment that needs to be had. But I think it's a good place to closing message to the voters of Oxford County and anybody else listening. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to quickly answer some of those questions. 308 candidates, by the way, that we have. And yes, I do know about the Chinese military mining the gold mines. I don't know too much about it. But if you really think about your freedoms, you really think about your child's, grandchild's, and great-grandchild's future, PPC is the only way to go. Right now, every child that is born is $26,000 in debt. How can you imagine what that's going to be? In 10 years, we could be getting up to 40,000 or more. Would you have that there, Greg?
Yeah, I do. I'm ready. A baby born this year, more than $26,000 in federal debt. Half century from now, that will be about $67,000. Not to mention interest charges will eat away at $3.8 trillion of taxpayers' money by 2070. This part terrifies me. Starting in 2043, interest charges will exceed the government's budget deficits. There we go.
Yeah, it's pretty scary. So with the PPC government, what you're going to have is fiscal responsible spending. Okay, we are going to reduce that deficit. Now, we did say in the last election we do it in 2 years, but unfortunately, we're up to $1 trillion plus in a deficit right now. So we're not going to be able to do that. And remember, inflation is just an extra tax onto you. Right now, we're only supposed to be at 2% according to the Bank of Canada, but we're at 3.7. So $100 today, people, just think about it in 10 years. It's that's going to be $128 at just 3.7. And we know that inflation is just going to keep going up and up and up. So if you want to have, for the people, vote for the people. I'm going to stand up for you as your voice. Now, I'm not looking at saying we're going to win the government and we're going to win the PM. But if I can win, I can be the opposition voice that you need. I can be there to vote for you, the people, and to make sure that I'm doing right by the people, because you were the one that voted for me. Let me be your voice. Let me take your concerns to Ottawa. Let me out the corruption, because I don't care if I go to jail. If I see corruption in our government, I'm going to out it. I'm going to give you the truth. And it doesn't matter how many names people call me and anything else. You can't stop me fighting for my country that I love so much, that I will die for, to make sure that my grandchildren and their grandchildren can have the great country that I know Canada can be. I've been living in Canada for 56 years, and I am so blessed to be a Canadian citizen. And anyone that comes to Canada is blessed to be a Canadian citizen, to live in such a great country. Let's not lose our country over a division of a vaccine.
All right, everyone. Thank you for joining Diverge Media. This has been an interview with Wendy Martin, your Oxford PPC candidate, the People's Party of Canada. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.